You're into everything. You're absolutely everything. You're controlling my thermostat. You're driving cars now on the highway. I mean, you're into absolutely everything. How do you keep the teams working in the same general direction? How does that work? And beyond that, explain the diagram. You have a Venn diagram, and you say how you choose ideas, big ideas. So explain how do you keep the teams all generally going in the same direction? How do you know what's a Google thing and what's not? How do you do that?
We make a list, and then we sort of go through it. We used to have a list called the Top 100, which had 300 things on it. We could never get it down to 100. And we would sit there and say, well, which of these are more important? And through that process of discussion, we would end up prioritizing. And the key thing about the management meetings is they can't be consensus. They have to be looking for the best idea, and they're different. In a consensus, everybody kind of fights to the median. Whereas in our case, what we said is, what's the better idea? Does anybody have a better idea than what we're currently doing? And then we have this big argument internally. Eventually, somebody says, well, why don't we try this? And then the job of the leader, in this case, you, is to say, okay, let's go after that and come back in a day and tell me what to do.
Yeah, Glenn, you asked about the Venn diagram, and that really relates to starting from the premise of how large is the opportunity. Many companies kind of focus on what they see as greenfield markets, which are usually green for a reason. There's not a great opportunity there. So for us, the number one thing is what is the scope and opportunity of this market? And the next thing that we then look at is can we use technology in some unique way to fundamentally improve the products in that space? And where those two things match, we then conclude that there's a big opportunity.
So do you guys start with, I want to change the world, or do you start with, we need to make money?
Well, a little bit of both. One of the secrets of Google is that the search business has been highly profitable in the sense that the ads work really, really well because they're so targeted. And that money gives us, if you will, the rope to try things that maybe other companies that don't have such high gross margins are unable to, or they can't get the financing. But the core principle is actually not about money at all. It's about users. And one of the sort of key slogans of the company is put the user first. So if the Nest thermostat makes the user happier, which indeed it does, that's an improvement. If the self-driving car, improves people's lives, and in particular allows them to stay alive, right, that's much better. We don't worry about what the prices of these things are. We'll figure that out later.
So when you get into, I think there's and I could be wrong, I think there's a change in Silicon Valley. I think there were a lot of people in Silicon Valley that maybe thought that they were wildly liberal and have found themselves to be more libertarian because a lot of these guys are 25 years old and they started something in their basement and now they're like, holy cow, look at what I'm building. And they know they don't need the government. And now the government is starting to knock on their door and say, hey, you can't do that. And I think people who are 20-something years old aren't used to somebody coming in and saying, you can't do that. And now they're finding themselves saying, wait, government is a necessary evil, but we don't need to have all of this government. You guys, on the other hand, are deeply in bed with the government. You got, what is it, 25? The self-driving cars, there were 29 permits issued for the state of California. 25 of them went to you guys.
Well, we're not in bed with them. We're regulated by them. What you're saying is something that's been true for many, many decades, right? The tech industry is famously liberal on social issues and famously conservative on financial issues. The saying of the industry is government out of the boardroom, government out of the bedroom. And I think that's roughly what you're feeling. This libertarian streak has been there for a very long time for the reasons that you say. Exactly right. And the problem, of course, is that we are inventing things which really do affect traditional agreements with governments. So Google's in the information business. Well, there's nothing more important than information. So if you're a political leader or a government, or especially a restrictive government, a dictatorship, you want to control information. You don't want freedom of expression for your citizens.
So how do you how do you guys view the world, with the world changing as much as it is? And I mean, driving cars. How long before the driving car is we're all being driven to work?
It's completely dependent upon the regulatory process. The technology works. It was invented literally in 2004 and 2005. And the reason it's so serious is there are roughly 31,000 people who die on American highways every year. So those are your family, those are your friends, those are our citizens. So the quicker we can move this stuff out, the better. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we're sure it will happen over a long enough period of time. It's too valuable.